I'd like to call to order this regular meeting of the Raton City Commission. Michael Ann, could we have roll call, please?
Mayor Sagata.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Schuster.
Present.
Commissioner Chatterley.
Present.
Commissioner Chavez.
Present.
Commissioner Giacomo
Absent.
is not present.
Could you all please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Nice to see you all here this evening. It's a little warm in the chambers, but we'll make do. We've got a couple of announcements here. Our next regular commission meeting will be Tuesday, May 22nd at 6 p.m. here in the chambers. And this time we've got 6 proclamations that we are going to go through. And we're going to kick it off with Run for the Wall 2018. Mr. Chavez?
Run for the Wall Week, May 13th through the 19th, 2018. Whereas the Run for the Wall is an annual event that started in 1989 by a couple of Vietnam veterans who traveled across the heartland to remind us of the fact that we still have thousands of men and women still unaccounted for from all of our wars. And whereas now its 30th year, the Run for the Wall event begins in California and ends Friday before Memorial Day weekend at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. And whereas hundreds of riders will make many stops during this 10-day event at memorials, VA hospitals, and participate in parades on their journey. And whereas Raton has been chosen by the Run for the Wall organizers as one of the only of a handful of cities that these riders will come through on their journey to Washington. Now therefore does James Neil Sagata, the mayor of the city of Raton, proclaim May 13th through the 19th, 2018 as Run for the Wall Week, and urge all citizens in Raton and surrounding communities to extend a heartfelt welcome to these dedicated riders. We also urge all businesses and individuals to fly their U.S. and POW flags as a show of patriotism to our country's Vietnam veterans and these Run for the Wall riders. In witness, therefore, the Mayor, Neil Sagata, hereto set his hand and seal and cause the seal of the city of Raton to be affixed this 8th day of May, 2018.
Some representatives. All right.
I gotta watch these bikers, guys. I'm gonna give by the pretty one over here. There you go, guys.
Thank you, guys. Okay, next up, we have a proclamation for Mental Health Month, May 2018. Commissioner Schuster.
Mental Health Month, May 2018. Whereas mental health is essential to everyone's overall health and well-being, and whereas all Americans experience times of difficulty and stress in their lives, and whereas prevention is an effective way to reduce the burden of mental health conditions, and whereas there is a strong research that diet, exercise, sleep, and stress management can help all Americans protect their health and well-being, and whereas mental health conditions are real and prevalent, made it worse, sorry. Prevalent in our nation, and whereas with effective treatment, those individuals with mental health conditions can recover and lead full, productive lives, and whereas each business, school, government agency, healthcare provider, and organization and citizen shares the burden of mental health problems and has a responsibility to promote mental health wellness and support prevention efforts. Now, therefore, does James Neil Sagata Jr., Mayor of the City of Raton, New Mexico does proclaim the month May 2018 as Mental Health Month and urges all citizens, government agencies, public and private institutions, businesses, and schools in Raton to recommit our community to increasing awareness and understanding of mental health, the steps our citizens can take to protect their mental health, and the need for appropriate and accessible services for all people with mental health conditions before stage 4. In witness whereof he has hereunto set his hand and seal and caused the seal of the city of Raton to be affixed this 8th day of May 2018. City of Raton.
Do we have a recipient? Yes.
Very good.
Thank you. Okay, next proclamation is Municipal Clerks Week, May 6th through 12th. Commissioner Chatterley.
Municipal Clerks Week, May 6 through 12, 2018. Whereas the office of the municipal clerk, a time-honored and vital part of local government, exists throughout the world, and whereas the office of the municipal clerk is the oldest among public servants, and whereas the office of the municipal clerk provides the professional link between the citizens, the local governing bodies, and agencies of government at other levels, and whereas municipal clerks have pledged to be ever mindful of their neutrality and impartiality, rendering equal service to all, and whereas the municipal clerk serves as the information center on functions of local government and community, and whereas municipal clerks continually strive to improve the administration of the affairs of the office of the municipal clerk through participation in education programs, seminars, workshops, and the annual meetings of their state, province, county, and international professional organizations. And whereas it is most appropriate that we recognize the accomplishments of the office of the municipal clerk, now therefore does James Neal Sagata Jr., Mayor of the City of Raton, New Mexico, recognize the week of May 6th through May 12th, 2018 as Municipal Clerks Week, and further extend appreciation to our City Clerk, Michael Ann Antonucci, Deputy Clerk Robin Osborne, and Assistant Clerk Desiree Trujillo, and to all municipal clerks for the vital services they perform and their exemplary dedication to the communities they represent. In witness thereof, does James Neal Sagata set his hand and seal and cause the seal of the City of Raton to be affixed this 8th day of May, 2018.
Everybody for our appreciation for all you do.
Thank you, guys.
I just wanted to tell you I appreciate your confidence in me as your city clerk, and I have an awesome staff, and I appreciate everything that they do as well.
Well, we appreciate you guys
Greatly.
very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, next we have Drinking Water Week, May 6th through 12th. Drinking Water Week, May 6th through 12th, 2018. Whereas water follows a natural cycle from earth to earth again, and whereas water is our most valuable natural resource, and whereas water is a basic and essential need of every living creature, and whereas only tap water delivers public health protection, fire protection, support for our economy, and the quality of life we enjoy, and whereas any measure of a successful society, low mortality rates, economic growth and diversity, productivity, and public safety are in some way related to access to safe water, and whereas we are all stewards of the water infrastructure upon which future generations depend, and the citizens of Raton should have a safe, dependable supply of water now and into the future. Now, therefore, do I, James Neal Sagata Jr., Mayor of the City of Raton, hereby proclaim May 6th through 12th, 2018 as Drinking Water Week in the City of Raton, and urge all citizens to help protect our source waters from pollution to practice water conservation, and to get involved in local water issues by getting to know their water. In witness hereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused the seal of the City of Raton to be affixed this 8th day of May, 2018.
That's right.
How you guys doing, dude? How are you?
Flowers for you guys.
Make the flowers grow.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, guys.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay, next one up is National Police Week, May 13th and 19th. Commissioner Chavez.
National Police Week, May 13th to 19th, 2018. Whereas the Congress and the President of the United States have designated May 15th as Peace Officers Memorial Day and this week, and the week in which May 15th falls as National Police Week. And whereas the members of the law enforcement agency of Raton play an essential role in safeguarding the rights and freedoms of Raton, and whereas it is important that all citizens know and understand the duties, responsibilities, hazards, and sacrifices of their law enforcement agency, and that members of our law enforcement agency recognize their duty to serve the people by safeguarding life and property, by protecting them against violence and disorder, and protecting the innocents against deception and the weak against oppression. And whereas the men and women of the law enforcement agency of Raton unceasingly provide a vital public service, therefore does James Neil Segata, Mayor of the City of Raton, proclaim May 13th through 19th as National Police Week. And we call upon all citizens all patriotic, civic, and educational organizations of Raton to extend a sincere, and heartfelt thank you to all enforcement officers, past and present, who by their faithful and loyal devotion to their responsibilities have rendered a dedicated service to their communities, and in so doing have established for themselves an enviable and enduring reputation for preserving the rights and security of all citizens. In witness, therefore, James Neil Segata, Mayor of the City of Raton, sets his hand and seal be affixed this 8th day of May, 2018.
And finally, we have a proclamation honoring Dispatch Supervisor Carol Baca. Whereas Carol Baca started working for the City of Raton Police Department as a telecommunicator in 1993 and graduated from the New Mexico Law Enforcement Academy, earning her telecommunications certificate. And whereas Carol Baca is also a long-standing member of the following associations: National Emergency Association, 911 Affiliate, and the Association of Public Safety Communication Officials. And whereas Carol Baca was promoted in July 2008 and has proudly served as the dispatch supervisor for the past 10 years. And whereas Carol Baca has performed a key function in the efficient operations of the E91 Dispatch Center and has been instrumental in obtaining grant funding for training, a generator, equipment, dispatch consoles, and other dispatch center improvements. And whereas Carol Baca will retire soon and will be the first person to complete a full 25-year uninterrupted commitment to telecommunications for the City of Raton. And whereas Carol Baca has exhibited compassion, understanding, and professionalism during the performance of her career. Now, therefore, do I, James Neil Segata Jr., Mayor of the City of Raton, on behalf of the Commission and our residents, wish Mrs. Baca and her family good health and happiness, and do hereby honor and commend Mrs. Baca for her years of outstanding service to the City of Raton, and urge all citizens to thank Mrs. Baca for her professionalism and dedication to keep our city and citizens safe. In witness hereof, I have hereunto set my hand and cause the seal of the City of Raton to to be affixed this 8th day of May, 2018. Pete. Pete, we're not going to go without 2 words.
Well, I told Chief Prices, I let him know everything I wanted to say, and he was gonna do it for me. I truly, God has blessed me with the job I truly loved.
So we appreciate everything you've done for
The
us.
city has been good to me, and to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carol.
Okay, and at this time we have a presentation of a plaque to the city of Raton regarding the Battle of the Badges Blood Drive. Mr. Berry, do you know about this? I don't know anything about this.
Michael Anna, shift this over to you.
We actually have Anna Luisa Coronado
Oh, okay.
and Sarah Munden here this evening to do the presentation.
Right on.
So there's a little bit of a story that goes behind us being able to do Battle of the Badges. And I'm going to make it as quick as possible. When I moved here in 2006, I didn't realize I was going to have to understand how important blood donations were. Okay. 2011, I started trying to help create blood drives here in Raton. Once again, my understanding was there was, at one time, really, really great outpour. And then it kind of, as times change. Well, through that time, we've been able to create such a name for the city of Raton, the community blood drives that we have, that we were invited to be a part of the Battle of the Badges in 2016. As a rural community who can provide the amount of units that we've been able to provide as a collaborative community, that's awesome. That's something they look for. Unfortunately, we weren't able to present a trophy. We didn't have that. It wasn't sent to us, snail mail. I don't know how it works. But our 2016 winners for Battle of the Badges in June was Firefighters won. Of course, it was everybody coming in to donate was allowed to vote for their law enforcement entity, whether it was any of the badges on law enforcement, your fish and game, your correction officers, on the fire department, it would be your firefighters, your EMS, because we are a rural community. We have a lot of little rural communities, and so all those badges kind of mix in together. So, to get to the end of the story here, 2017, we were able to host another one, which knocked 2016 out of the water, which knocked everybody's socks off in Albuquerque, because they were like, this little community is just pouring out the support. So some of the little statistics to go with 2016 was we were supposed to have a total of 41 expected blood units. That's from your donors, okay? Each donor can give 2 units if they are up to it and it shows that they're okay, okay? We got 53 units, okay? That was awesome. 29 votes for the fire department, EMS, and 19 for law enforcement. 2017's blood drive, Battle of the Badges, we had to turn donors away. We didn't have enough time. We didn't have enough text. It was packed. It was just beautiful,
Wow.
the pour out. So basically, we ended up with 86 donor votes,
Wow.
77 units of blood. We had blown out our goal the first day, and everything the next day, because we do have 2-day drives, was just like added bonus for the United Blood Services, because they are very low. As soon as our blood comes in, as soon as it goes out. We had a talk at the last blood drive. They were talking about flying it out from the airport. So that just lets you know, Raton is a viable, resource for donations. It's the heart, the giving. So my thing was, where do we put this? Where do we put this beautiful plaque that shows every year the support, the competition, but where everybody's going to see it?
Sure.
City of Raton, City Hall, It's this community that's helped this blood drive thrive, to where our next Battle of the Badges, they're asking if we can get a 3rd day because of
Wow.
how awesome the support is. and the demand, because people were so sad they had to be turned away, you know. But what could we do except for add another day? So our 2-day, 4 times a year blood drives, we have now gotten one awesome drive a year for possibly 3 days to show the outpour of gratitude to these awesome first responders, along with, you know, just the fact that, hey, firefighters won it 2 years in a row, blew it out of the water, you know. It's awesome. I'm sorry, you know, I have to give my heart to that side, you know, a little bit.
Law enforcement's coming this time.
So you see how that goes down. But with all of this said, this is the plaque that we would like to present with our winners of 2016, 2017 Battle of the Badges, our firefighters, local, Raton, and Colfax County.
Cool.
And our representative for the city of Raton, please.
Thank you guys, that is awesome.
So this is to house here each year. We will put the new
Cool.
winners, and for the firefighters.
We did
have
get a
one?
second plaque so
Yes,
they can
because
actually take it to their
Competition is competition. And each year, they will have to, if they do not win this next year, they will
Have to give it.
has it.
Cool, right on. Very good. Thank you all. All right, we've reached that point on the agenda where we have comments from the general public. Is there anyone here wishing to address the commission at this time? Okay, not seeing anybody, I guess we'll move on. Never mind, I was having a senior moment there, it's all right. You'll all get there eventually. Item 6. And item A, deliberate and act on corrections to resolution numbering from the April 24th, 2018 commission meeting. Numbers 25 through 27 were used and should be 24 to 26. Michael Ann?
Mayor and Commission, I'm sorry, I discovered when I was doing the minutes that I had deleted an item on our agenda last month, and then it threw my numbers off and I forgot to renumber them. So prior to you approving the minutes this evening, I was just going to have you take action on me making the correction, and then we'll make that correction in the minutes.
Okay.
For numbers, they're reflected in the minutes right now as 25, 26, 27, and then I would change them to the correct 24, 25, 26.
Okay.
So that the minutes will be correct as well.
I'll move to approve the correction of the numbering, numbers 25 through 27 to numbers 24 through 26 of the April 24th, 2018 commission meeting.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to amend the numbers. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, vote by the sign of aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item B, approval of the April 24th, 2018 regular commission meeting minutes. You all have had them in your pack.
I have one small correction.
Okay.
Just on the North Central New Mexico report. The third to last line that says faced with funding cuts and that services have been stopped. I just like the word some inserted because not all services were stopped.
Oh, okay. Okay, so just that some
Just
services.
some services, yep.
Okay, sorry, that
No, that's okay. It's a long report.
was my misunderstanding. So, okay, we'll make that correction.
Thanks.
Are there any other corrections or additions, deletions?
I make a motion to approve the amended minutes.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes as amended. Any further discussion? All in favor, vote by the sign of aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries, thank you. Item C, deliberate and act on event form for Raton Main Street Carnival. I believe we have Diana here. Mr. Barry, do you want to talk first? Or
I'll go ahead and make some comments.
Okay.
Mayor, this is a Raton Main Street event. The carnival has been held for a number of years. It's been held at the Raton High School parking lot in past years. I think this is the initial year that the event will be sponsored by Raton Main Street. Sun Valley Rides have told us that they like coming to Raton. It's on their schedule. It's on their route. I think that they have a good turnout to this. The action tonight, I would tell you that the event has been reviewed by our departments, all of our emergency services, our public works in regard to traffic issues, because it's a well-attended event. However, we are not proposing a road closure associated with this event, and the high school or Raton Public Schools have consented to hold the event again in their parking lot. And we looked at different locations throughout the city. Of course, as you can imagine, with some of the carnival rides, you need a certain amount of clearance, you need a certain amount of level, compact ground. You need things like water service and power service. So it turns out that the high school parking lot is probably the best location that we have, and so we're set up for that. And with that, Mayor, I would turn it over to Diana.
We just are happy to bring it to Raton again, give the community something to do, the kids something to do in the summer. It'll be held June 7th through the 10th. And this is the first year that Raton Main Street will be the host organization. And this is one of our efforts to raise funds for expenses that we have on our operational side. So
cool. Right on.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Sanchez?
I make a motion to approve event form for the Raton Main Street Carnival.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the event form for Raton Main Street Carnival. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, vote by the sign of aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item D, deliberate and act on ratification of union agreement between the City of Raton and AFSCME Council 18. Mr. Barry.
Mayor and Commission, as you know, we have been in collective bargaining with the AFSCME organization. They represent our blue-collar employees, employees that work in streets, parks, solid waste, and building maintenance for us. We did tentatively agree to final contract, and AFSCME has been in the process of evaluating that. So really, just today, the unit has voted affirmatively to approve the agreement as presented to you, the commission. The contract is largely unchanged from past years. The proposal consists of a 3-year contract that would commence on July 1st. And what you see over the 3-year period is a 2% raise for each classification of employee listed in that agreement each year for the 3 years. That's the primary issue that we've listed in the contract. I think that's a good contract for both parties. We bring it to you tonight with my recommendation for your approval of the contract as submitted.
Okay, Mr. Barry, I have one question. Year 3, it says a 1.75% increase.
Yeah, we had a couple of different proposals in there, Mayor, and I want to call on Jason again. Jason was involved in our negotiations. Jason Phillips, Public Works Director, for clarification on that.
Mayor Scott is correct. Year 3 is 1.75%. First 3 years are 2%.
So yeah, that is correct. So we have a 2%, 1.75%.
Okay. Is there any other questions for Mr. Barry
I have none.
or Mr. Phillips? Would entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve Union agreement between City of Raton and FC Council 18.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the union agreement between the City of Raton and ASME Council 18. Is there any further discussion? Michael, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Mayor Pro Tem Schuster,
Yes.
Commissioner Chavez,
Yes.
Commissioner Chatterley,
Yes.
Mayor Sagata.
Yes.
Something. I just came here. I was coming about the water. Actually, December 2012, there was a water break here, which was the worst water break Raton has had, and a lot of people got sick. I had giardia, which is a parasite in the water, caused by the water, and I suffered a lot. I had rashes. I got staph, MRSA, like a lot of things. A lot of people died from cancer that year, and 3 people in my block died. 3 people in their block do not die. Like, I want to know, was there something in the water?
There's nothing on our agenda to address that right now. We're kind of unprepared for that, but if you'll get with an appointment with Mr. Barry in the future and we can discuss it, but we can't address that right now because we don't have any information.
Okay, yeah, because I came and filed. Nobody wanted to pay for any of the damage in my house or my pain and suffering, like for 3 years. And I'm not the only one, there's other people, so. Yeah, if you can look into that, I will be back, I guess.
All right, thank you. Okay, moving on to item E, planning and zoning report and consideration to schedule public hearing L1 to, or LI to C3, or is that L1? I guess it's LI to C3, rezone request for property located at 200 East Hereford Avenue, formerly Morgan Portable Buildings. Mr. Berry?
Mayor and Commission, this is a consideration for a rezoning from light industrial to a commercial zone for the property that, as you described, is located on Hereford Avenue and formerly was a site that Morgan Buildings operated, and they constructed portable buildings there for an extended period of time, but that operation had ended some time ago. Now, let's talk about the action here tonight. This is true on the next item as well. What the consideration is that we would schedule a public hearing in the future. The ordinance regarding rezoning action prescribes a time that the action would be, public notice would be issued, and anybody that would have a comment on the rezoning, either this or under the next item, we definitely want to give them adequate time and opportunity to make their comments known on the issue. So what the ordinance prescribes is that we would publish this in the newspaper, we would post the property, and we would send certified letters to property owners within a certain distance of the area that is being proposed to rezone. Now, in this case, we had a single property that was zoned light industrial, and it was surrounded by property that is zoned commercial. Commercial is the higher and better use in this case. Under the light industrial, you could do any of those uses that are listed under a C3 zone, but in addition to that, you could do some industrial uses. So since that industrial use has ended, and there is currently a property owner that has stated his intention to develop the property in a commercial manner, it would be appropriate this time to rezone that to a commercial zone. And the abutting zones are C4 or C3. We were asking the commission to consider a C3 zone. So that is a highway servicing district type of zone. Typically is zoned for businesses like motels, restaurants, gas stations, those kind of businesses that would service traffic coming in to Raton off of the highway. So we think that that's appropriate in this case. I would tell you that this is an unusual circumstance, but this is true with this item and the next item. This is a request from the city of Raton to you all, the commissioner, the city manager making the request really, and it's not coming from a property owner. So that's typically not what we see. We would typically see a property owner request a specific zoning. But we feel it's important to clean up this isolated LI zone. And one thing that is undesirable as far as our planning for the community is to allow individual properties to be zoned differently than those properties surrounding them. That's called a spot zone, and this is an opportunity to remove a spot zone. There was a compelling reason to have an LI at that site in past years, but I don't think we want to leave that designation currently. So we did take this request to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Under the ordinance, Planning and Zoning Commission makes a recommendation to the commission. They did hear the presentation, looked over the materials. You have a letter in the packet from the chairman of the Raton Planning and Zoning Commission, in which they're telling you that they are affirmatively giving you their recommendation for the rezoning. So that's happened. What we would do again tonight is schedule a public hearing in the future, and there are times prescribed in the ordinance which we would comply with. So we will not bring this back up at the next public hearing, the next city commission meeting. It would take a little longer than that, and then after that time, the commission can take action on it, and as prescribed in the ordinance, you can take action if you so choose to rezone the property by resolution. So that would be the process that we have described here. And I think we need to talk about the date. And Michael Ann, I don't know if you have the calendar there,
Yeah.
but I think we would look at the first meeting in June.
June 12th.
So June 12th is when we would propose to have the public hearing at a city commission meeting during the regular meeting, and we will provide those forms of notification to interested parties.
Really?
Only one public hearing?
There is a minimum of one public hearing held. However, there's not a hurry on the action, and the commission can take any additional steps that you feel necessary to, inform yourself or to provide notification to the public. So I think the one thing that we want to avoid is anybody in the public saying, I didn't know about this, I wasn't informed about this. So I think we want to give the public every opportunity to bring their comments to the commission. And again, somebody could do that by coming to the meeting at that date, but they can submit those comments in writing. They can give us a phone call. Any form of communication is acceptable. We'll bring that to the commission. But Commissioner, we could certainly schedule more than one public hearing. That would be at your discretion.
Well, I was just wondering if by statute that we had to have 3 or 2 or more, because I'm aware of what's going on at that location, and I think one would be ample, personally.
This would be governed by ordinance, which provides for a minimum of one public hearing.
Got any other comments for Mr. Berry?
Nope.
We have nothing to consider here other than the public hearing will be June 12th.
I think we would go ahead and entertain an action by the commission to schedule the public hearing for June 12th.
I'll make a motion to schedule a public hearing on June 12th for the LI to C3 rezoning request for property located at 200 East Hereford Avenue, formerly Morgan Portable Buildings.
I'll second that. So we have a motion and a second to schedule the meeting for our regular commission meeting of June 12th. Is there any other further discussion? All in favor, vote by the sign of aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. Item F is basically the same thing except another property, Mr. Murray?
Mayor and Commission, there's a lot of similarity to the previous item that we talked about. In this case, we're talking about a property that butts Arnold Street, Woodrow Avenue, and Market Street. It's lots 17 through 20 of Block 16 of the Fairview Addition. And on this site, in the past, was a facility called the Mountain View Mobile Home Park. So there currently is not a mobile home park usage of the property. There are no structures remaining on the property. This is a spot zone situation in which that property was zoned mobile home subdivision, which, by the way, there's a distinct difference between a mobile home subdivision and a mobile home park. So the mobile home subdivision really was not the proper zoning for the usage when it existed. I would tell you that the usage, the mobile home park, was an old usage, may have predated the ordinance or this specific zoning, so it did, under all likelihood, have a grandfathered in status at the time. However, the property is not in use currently, and it does constitute another spot zone. The highest and best use in this case is a residential use. The surrounding area is generally residential, zoned R5. That's a dense residential zone. There are some other abutting zones. There's the King Energy property on Woodrow Avenue, and there's the La Mesa Park property, which do have other zones. But we recommend the higher and better use of R5 zoning for this lot to be consistent with the general surrounding area.
Is there any current development process for that area?
Mayor and Commissioner, there is not a proposed development plan that we're aware of currently on the property.
So it's just really cleaning up of the zoning.
It's cleaning up the map and eliminating a spot zone.
Okay.
This is a request again from the city of Raton to you, the commissioners. Again, we would propose a June 12th public hearing. We'll go through the proper notification, and then we would be able to consider action by resolution following the public hearing.
I'll move to approve a public hearing on June 12th, 2018 for rezoning consideration.
I'll second it.
MHS to R5.
We have a motion and a second to schedule the public hearing for June 12th, our regular meeting. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, vote by the sign of aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. Item G. Deliberate and act on fiscal year 19 agreement number 19-690-14481. Between the City of Raton and the State of New Mexico Children, Youth, and Families Department. Mr. Berry?
I am going to turn this over to her treasurer, Michael Land. She is part of a great team that really makes this program effective and a valuable program in Raton. And a lot of it is the work of a couple of individuals we have here, but on our team, Michael Ann Antonucci is really a key person in this. So I'd like to turn it over to you, Michael Ann, if you can give us some details.
Mayor and Commission, just one item of clarification. Prior to us posting the agenda, we hadn't received the final grant documents. So the agreement number is actually the last 5 digits is 15189. So the minutes and our action this evening will reflect that number as the correct agreement number. We were assuming that maybe they just changed the first 2 digits to 19, but they changed the whole numbers. So with me this evening, I do have Danielle Archuleta, our coordinator for this program, and she does an awesome job. And you will see in this year's agreement that we've been awarded an additional it's like $31,000. And so we were told earlier in the year that most entities would probably receive a reduction. So I want to applaud Danielle and her efforts in putting our application together this year. And so it's really because of her efforts and working with our subcontractor, who this year is HRDA, working with them to grow the programs, and the program's been very successful, and it has grown exponentially over the last 3 to 4 years. So I probably will call on Danielle to talk a little bit about, we're going to be looking at the budget and going over some of the changes in this year's agreement as per the budget and the number of sessions that each program for Girls Circle, Boys Council, and Restorative Justice that would be part of the contract, which we would bring to you at a later date to subcontract with somebody to provide those direct youth services. So once we approve the agreement this evening, it'll go back to CIFD. We will need to do a request for proposals because of the dollar amount that we would be talking about would be over $60,000, and so we would start that process probably immediately after the contract's approved, and then we would bring that back to the commission to award a contract to the selected vendor. So Danielle.
Thank you, Michael. Good evening, everyone. I'm real excited. I started in fiscal year 2013, and we're going into fiscal year 2019 underneath the City of Raton as a Continuum Coordinator. And this year's grant is very exciting, but it is a little different. Last year we did receive a fee per service in Girls Circle at $250 per session, and this year it has been reduced to $150 per session. So that is the amount that would be reimbursable back to the subcontractor. And for our Boys Council, it's the same. It's based on 400 youth to be served with 150 by 330 sessions. I will share that this year we are up to 285 sessions, and we have served a total of 400 youth in both programs.
Cool.
So it's at a very good place. Also, tonight I kind of want to reiterate the scope of my work as Continuum Coordinator. It's very specific in this contract. And in years past, to build up the programs, I've gone above and beyond, to be honest, to make sure that programs are set in stone. And I've been doing intakes that the subcontractors should be required to do. I do a lot of reporting, and I read through all of their notes and gather all that data and collect it in an end of the year report, which is still necessary and required of my job. But I've also spent a lot of time in group sessions to ensure the productivity of the group and to ensure that the students receive positive outcomes. Where we're at now is because it was built in 2013 up from $8,000 per program up to where it's currently at $60,000 and $49,500. Is in a very good place to where there is actually a really great procedure book in place that I have developed, and that will go out to whoever does receive the subcontract to be able to assist them in doing those intakes. Now, subcontractors already have prior experience in doing intakes. It was just a responsibility that I took on primarily to assist to ensure the success of the groups. But at this time, I'd like to follow this contract completely to be able to develop the RFP. And therefore, they would be rendered and entitled to fulfill those services as what's said in this contract. And in saying that, I just want to share it's been a true delight and it's been an honor to be the Continuum Coordinator. I'm looking forward to fiscal year 2019. It is 30 hours or less for my position, a total of $35,000 for the year. Continuum Coordinator travel is $500. Youth committee members will get $300, and this prior year we got a line item of $1,000, and I'm real pleased to announce that the youth board is very strong. There's 12 members. I was nervous with the alternative school closing because that was the core of our board last fiscal year. And they did an excellent job, but now we've moved it over into Raton High School, and staff and administrative at the Raton High School has been excellent with the programs. They work wonderful with facilitators. Facilitators get updates all the time, and they transfer that over to me, and then I follow up with administrative staff. Plus on the board, we have Duncan Ware that holds a very important position. He's the high school principal, and then also Ms. Simpson. She has a strong backing, and we've also been collaborative partners with Sir Jobs to be able to bring some of the youth into jobs with the Mandela Center and other positions. So it's in a really great place. It is built up to the monument where it should be. To continue to increase funding, I do see that kind of difficult, to be honest, for next upcoming years, but not saying it's not doable. Depending on the amount of what's served in fiscal year 2019, that criteria will be used and utilized for the grant writing of fiscal year 2020. And none of this could be achievable without being under the City of Raton. So we greatly appreciate the support, and Mike Wen has been so excellent in the invoicing and always finding the correct procurement process to everything that's responsible. And in saying that, I am disappointed because there is no more administrative fee services that we can charge. It's across the board with 150 fee per service per programs and no 4% administrative fee. So that's something important to look at. And then as far as our restorative justice, now that is to serve youth who have received a first-time offense, and those referrals come from JPOs or from our schools if they're having behaviors that are negative and fighting or bullying or anything like that. And this year we are at serving 35 total youth, and for fiscal year 2019 it's required for 50 youth to be served. The fee per service for pre-circle this year was $75. It's going down to $50. And then circle was at $200, and it's going to $150. The post was at $75, and it will be going to $50. Now the work is very doable, although in the RFP it's going to have to be clear and evident the job responsibilities for pre and post work, because that would only give about 3 hours worth of work possible to complete those items. So I want to make sure that everything's very specific and clear for fiscal year 2019 with these changes. But I will share it is a Continuum Act. They have a really great JJAC board that just visited last month, and the convention center was utilized, and we thank you all for that. And they shared that across the board they're wanting to move it towards state mandatory requirements, and to where every continuum is able to reimburse the same fee per service, and so there's not a fluctuation in any other continuum. But other than that, they have also shared that they're going to take different things into consideration for fiscal year 2020. They just received a new chair, and he has a lot of experience in nonprofit organizations, and he's seen a lot of work that the coordinators do is very extensive and a lot more responsibilities than what's really on this contract. So he's a really great advocate for the whole continuum as a whole, but he's also realizing in order to utilize these services, more monies need to be rendered. So fiscal year 2020 looks very promising. I can see services being implemented and very doable with these amounts. They have shared 250 fee per service to our subcontractor, has been very generous. And so I'd also like to reflect that, because all other continuums only received 150 reimbursable for the past 3 years. And in sharing that information, I would like to also take a minute to look at the 40% minimum match liability for the City of Raton. And that does state underneath the contractor, but it is a continuum coordinator and the board's responsibility to fulfill that. It's not a requirement of the City of Raton. This year it was $56,000, and we're very close to meeting the match, and we typically go over by $3,000 or $4,000. We've never gone under, and I do foresee the same amount for this year to be about $3,000 or $4,000 over, not anything under. Although I think in the RFP when it's developed too, it needs to be clear to subcontractors that match is required, and therefore we need to do it in a team approach to be productive and successful at reaching that. And in saying that, I'm just very grateful to the whole City of Raton. We have many collaborative partnerships. I'm also grateful to Union County. They have a lot of great collaborative partnerships that have joined on with Colfax County and the City of Raton. And the board members have been in place now for at least 5 or more years. There are some new ones, and their term of service has been about 3 years now. So it's strongly supported. Everybody's on the same page of what the programs entail. I can remember coming to my first city commission meeting and really having to explain the programs, but they are preventative programs, and they do a really great job and service to our schools. And the whole goal of the programs is to alleviate some pressure of negative behaviors to our schools by servicing students. And if we can also do it as an out-of-school function or an after-school function, we do that as well. These last 2 weeks, we've had a total of 6 groups in each program. So we had a total of 12 groups going throughout the week. And from Longfellow After School to Clayton High School to Raton High School High Risk Group to kids that were engaged in fighting and referred to the program from the principal and JPO. So it's very extensive and it's very flexible, but also the sustainability is there because of the collaborative partnerships in the in-kind donations and contributions, and also the collaborative efforts make it successful.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I remember your first presentation. I
Thank
kind of
you.
put you under the fire on that one, and you've stepped up, and it's been an excellent program. So I
Thank
commend
you.
you.
Thank you, Mr. Sagata.
Yeah, and I want to just state that at the we were able to host the Juvenile Justice Committee conference, correct? And they were very complimentary of the work you've done, and so we appreciate you for that.
Thank you, Ms. Schuster.
Any other comments, questions for Ms. Archuleta? Entertain a
Thank you.
motion.
Go ahead.
I'll make a motion that we act on agreement number 19-690-15189 between the City of Raton and the State of New Mexico Children, Youth, and Families Department.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve and the agreement number 19-690-15189 between the City of Raton and the State of New Mexico Children, Youth, and Families Department. Is there any further discussion? Thank you. We have a roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Chatterley?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Schuster?
Yes.
Commissioner Chavez?
Yes.
Mayor Sagata?
Yes. Motion carries. Thank you. Item H, deliberate and act on appointment of City Commissioner Liaison to Lodgers Tax Advisory Board. Mr. Barry.
Mayor and Commission, this is an item that we had talked about several meetings ago, and I think there's been some deliberation and consideration on this. In the past, we have not had a designated liaison to this, to the Lodgers Tax Board, but I think the discussion has been that there are pretty critical discussions going on and information, and sometimes in the recent past when items come to the City Commission for their consideration, we're lacking information on that's important to consideration of that particular item. And so I think this proposal has come up to try to bolster that communication between Lodgers Tax Advisory Board and the applicants and the City Commission. The thing I would add to that, I think we generally acknowledge that we need improved communications, and we need more planning, and we probably need some to evaluate our policies or our philosophies on how we're utilizing this resource, Lodgers Tax, to really meet the need to promote and market Raton. And so, Mayor and Commission, I have scheduled a joint work session, a joint meeting between the City Commission and Lodgers Tax Advisory Board for Monday. I believe that's the 14th. And I would like to set it at the time that the Lodgers Tax Board will usually meet, and I'm going to look at Michael Ann and
3:30.
and say that's 3:30. if you all would put that in your calendar, I think it's important because of where we're at in this item and the conversation that we've had, that we get all of the members of the Lodgers Tax Advisory Board and commissioners as well, and as many of the people that typically would apply for those funds to sit down together and let's work on those policies that we need to work on. So Monday the 14th, 3:30 p.m. we'll have that meeting here in the City Commission chambers. And I think this is important. I think that as well, we had some staff changes that typically we would have somebody at the City Commission meeting that could kind of fill in those communication gaps, and we are working on being able to provide that here. We'd like to see Lodgers Tax Advisory Board members follow up with the commission periodically as well. That's something that you all have requested. I think that's something that we want to discuss there, and I think it works both ways. I think we probably appoint a liaison to this committee to carry that communications, and then I think the Lodgers Tax Advisory Board probably appoints a liaison to come to commission meetings and carry that communications forward as well. So I think that's one thing that we want to discuss. So I have one other thing, Mayor and Commission, while we're talking about dates, but I think that it's back on the agenda here for your consideration, just because I think we need to make an effort in improving that communications. The other thing I would bring up is when we get down to the discussion of the budget, we are getting close on time. We are going to get together on the 14th. We need to look at, and I want to kind of get some input on Michael Land on the next item, but we probably need to schedule a work session outside of a regular commission meeting between now and the next commission meeting as well. So we can talk about those dates and times. The 14th may be a possibility. It doesn't have to be that date, but that's something that we can think about. And that's all I have on merits.
All right, thank you, Mr. Berry. Yeah, I think several of us have had conversations with Mr. Berry about this Lodgers Tax Board position, so I think it is a good idea to have a liaison there. I know I've been trying to make as many as I can. I wouldn't mind being the liaison to that, but absolutely would entertain if anybody else would like to be. We would go that route. So.
Well, I'd like to suggest that since you've been going, that you continue to be the liaison, and possibly another commissioner could also attend, so that there may be two on occasion, or maybe a secondary, so that if you can't go, you could call the other and go, so that there's always a commissioner there.
Well, I think that if you can't make it as the liaison, any one of us, you just let us know and we'll show up.
I think that would work as well.
Sure.
Yeah. Typically, recently Monday is a heavy work schedule for me.
Typically meet on Wednesday.
Well, that's what I thought, which that's the other heavy work day for me.
Sure.
But
just tell us what you really mean.
Yeah. occasionally I could if you
Sure.
call me in advance, but I think it would be best if so I'll make the motion that we go ahead and appoint Mayor Sagata as the liaison, and when he can't be there, he will call on one of the rest of us.
I second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any other discussion? Travis, get your hand up. Okay, hearing none. All in favor, vote by the sign of aye.
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 Opposed? It carries. Item I, we will move into the public hearing part and discussion review of fiscal year 2019, our draft budget. Mr. Berry.
Mayor and Commission, if I could make some general broad brush kind of comments, and then I do want to enlist Michael Land to make some more specific input of information into regard to this item. But In front of you, you do have draft number 1 of the budget. You can see it's a large document. We're not going to go through every page, but I would like to kind of start at page 1 and go through a little bit of this information in front. So page 1 talks about special revenue funds, capital outlay funds, debt service funds, enterprise, several things like that. And I like to gloss over that right now because I think we get back to a conversation on items like that. And then on your next page, you have this sheet. It's our general fund budget revenue comparison. The general fund is an important component of the total budget. And you see that the projection is for flat revenues from gross receipts tax. On the next page, we'll see that gross receipts tax is the largest component of our revenue stream by far, and we have a couple other items, property tax and rent and services, which are much smaller than gross receipts tax, and then some other items that are smaller yet. So we really look at the gross receipts tax, and as we've talked about in past meetings, it's really a projection here as to what's going to happen with our gross receipts tax in the upcoming year. We see some new businesses that are in development. We know that Kmart has closed. It's really speculative to say what that effect of Kmart closing is going to have on our overall GRT over the period of an entire year. It's something that we're going to find out. And so I think it makes sense. Of course, we bring it all to you all for your input and your decision making, but we are projecting flat receipts in GRT for the upcoming year. So since that's the largest revenue component, that's going to have some bearing on our expense side of that, and that would be a recurring revenue. And largely when we look at the recurring expenses, primarily we're talking about personnel is going to be the largest component of the recurring expenses. So that's primarily what we're going to talk about. And overall, I would tell you that like the GRT revenues that you see as flat, this budget intends to hold the services that we have, provide basically the services that we do now with the same personnel that we do now. We don't see any jobs created or expansion of our basic services, but we would like to hold where we're at. We don't want to compromise on those services that we offer. As you've seen in going through the financial reports from month to month, our staff has done a great job as far as staying on budget with their expenses, and in some cases that's because we have jobs open and we either have elected not to fill them or we have not been able to fill them, and when that happens, we're compromising that service that we provide to the public. And one example I'll give you of that is our police department. So typically we are several officers short of the budgeted number of officers that we have in here, and we're at that place right now. Now that seems like it might be a good thing from the budget perspective, but of course that does compromise our ability to provide an important service to the public, number one, and number two, we're working a lot more overtime with the officers that we do have. So you can see the risks associated with that kind of a situation, not really where we want to be. It's just the nature of hiring certified police officers at this point in time. And I think a lot of communities, especially the littler communities, are having a similar situation. The large communities are saying the same thing. And so you see a competitive market out there for officers, and it's difficult for the small community to really compete with those larger agencies. And so I think that puts us at a bit of a disadvantage. But that is what we express in this budget, is that we would like to hold the level of service that we have currently. We think that we're able to do that. Again, I go back, as you look at the numbers, I go back to our month-to-month report where we are able to stay under our budget. And of course, we did exceed our revenue projection on GRT by a little bit through this past fiscal year. So I think that our staff is very attentive to those as we go through and able to manage both of those things. So while it's a fairly tight budget, I think we do have the ability to make it all work, as you've seen from those financial reports. You see a $4.7 million general fund budget expressed here, and that basically is flat. You also see in here that one of the components that we try to factor in projecting GRT is construction. Now, we've said before they should only lightly consider construction because some projects we think might happen. Sometimes they get delayed by a year. Sometimes they don't happen at all. And it's something that we may not be able to predict what happens in construction during the upcoming fiscal year. But when you have a tight budget, you really are forced to consider that, and you can see that consideration of potential GRT from construction projects. If we don't consider that, we're really looking at eliminating some positions more than likely. And if we overestimate those revenues, then we're going to get in trouble later on during the year. So I refer you back to our month-to-month management of both expenses and revenues, and the staff has done an excellent job in past tight budgets to do that, and also to build the general fund. And moving on, you see that police, dispatch, and animal control constitute about 40% of our budget. So I think that's a service that people in the community are really most concerned about, expressed as one of our highest priorities. And that really is our largest component of the budget also. You see that fire, and I believe that we're including our ambulance service in there, is about 26% of the budget, and then public works would be next at 9%, much smaller. So police and fire constitute, also emergency services, animal control, dispatch constitutes a very large portion of the budget. You have some historical comparisons with past years on GRT. I would caution you that there are different increments expressed in here, but you do see the pattern that prior to 2008, revenues were really climbing and climbing by some pretty good chunks, and then we have seen our revenue since 2008 over the last 10 years drop. Basically, it looks fairly level there, but we have added some increments in that time, so to try to stabilize the revenue side, and we have stabilized the revenue side, but by taking some actions here at the commission level. You see that the budget has some tabs to help you kind of organize different areas on this, and I would talk a little about our capital projects now. So as we said, the recurring revenues and the recurring expenses were basically flat. There's not a great deal to talk about in that. We don't have any real big changes in any department there. We're trying to maintain those services that we have in the past. But when we get down to our capital projects, we're going to talk about things that are going to be expressed in the budget that we have been leading up to this conversation over the past couple of meetings. And so during the past several meetings, one thing we've talked about is hangar at the airport to try to promote our flight school and aviation services at the airport. I think that's going to be a great economic development contributor to Raton in the future. It takes some time to ramp up this type of proposal that we're basically new to. I think we made great strides in the past couple of years as to developing the flight school. And one thing that we'd like to talk about as far as in that capital projects budget is the other half of the cost of a new hangar. So we talked about a $250,000 grant from state aviation. You all had approved that. We had talked about financing $250,000 to match that. That is the terms of that grant agreement with state aviation, that we would commit to matching that 50-50. The comment has been made that in lieu of financing that and paying financing costs and paying ongoing interest, we can look at reserves that we have now. We have adequate reserves to complete that project. I think basically you would look at that as borrowing the money from your general fund, and as the project develops, we see a revenue source from the lease of the flight school and the hangar, and so the general fund is not depleted. We would plan on replacing that with the revenues from that enterprise, basically, and it's going to take a little time for that really to scroll up to the level that we expect it to come up to. So we'll take your input on that. We'll take input from the public on that item. I would strongly recommend it to the commission that you consider that, allowing us to go forward in the new fiscal year with the construction of the hangar. I think it's absolutely essential to the development of the flight school. Also, we're going to talk about the cost of an ambulance in this budget. We're going to look at our general fund reserves for that. And what you'll see in the budget is that some time ago, you remember Chief Matthews came to the commission and he talked about new process of billing, new company helping us with billing, collections on that, and we have really seen a strong result, a strong increase in revenues from the ambulance service. But as we have a big demand on the ambulance service, we are doing a lot of transfers, and when we talk about transfers, we're not talking about a local vehicle. We're talking about a vehicle that will transfer from MCMC to Santa Fe, Albuquerque, Pueblo, Colorado Springs, those type of transfers, and it could be farther than that. We make transfers as far as Las Cruces and El Paso in the past, and so we have to have reliable equipment. That's a lot of miles that are put on our ambulance equipment. I think that we would have to consider, keeping that equipment up, and we would like to talk about expressing that. But we also see the strong revenue side of the ambulance service. So it's keeping our crew busy. We're up to staff now as far as our rank and file in our emergency services, fire department, and ambulance. We have lost an upper level position, and we'll have to talk about that as we go through some of the additional services. Code enforcement, vacant building enforcement, safety, planning and zoning. Those are additional duties that have really been assigned to that position of battalion chief, which we're lacking currently. So I think we have a little work to do in that area, but the department is very busy, and the transfer operation is a big part of how busy we are, how marginal we are as far as manpower there, and the equipment is essential to continuing to reliably offer that service. So that's something that we would talk to you about. As far as a street program, I owe you all a memorandum kind of detailing out the street program, but basically I think it's fairly straightforward. What I would recommend to the commission is that we emphasize phase one construction in the upcoming fiscal year of the Great Blocks project. So we have some funds from New Mexico Main Street capital outlay. I believe we have $320,000 that's there, and I don't think we like to have capital outlay sitting there very long. That requires a $90,000 match from the city of Raton that the commission had agreed to several years back, and we had talked about the full estimated construction cost being about $1 million. So I would tell you that in finding the additional funds, I think that we have some great prospects about leveraging grant funds, finding those funds, but that's not going to happen in the current fiscal year or the current construction season. And so I would propose to you that we initiate a phase one construction of that portion of the project, which we would have about $410,000 to do. Our portion would come from the gas tax. So we have that amount in the gas tax. You see a $400,000 balance here. I would propose to you that it's healthy to have about a $200,000 balance in that fund and put the rest of the money to work improving our streets as it's intended to do. We see revenues projected of about $150,000 a year from the gas tax, and as you remember, that's specific to street improvements. So additional street projects, we've talked about Hospital Drive. We want to build Hospital Drive in this current construction season. We are working on final design and environmental assessment of that project currently. When we get clearance on the environmental assessment, we'll request bids and bring bids for construction to the commission, but we do want to build that during the warm months of 2018. So total amount of $200,000 for the project. Our share is $50,000, and then we have a $150,000 grant from NMDOT for the remainder of that. So that's a key piece that we want to get constructed during the year. Additionally, we have a co-op grant that will expire December 31st of this year. I would propose it's a total amount of about $50,000. 25% of that is City of Raton share, but a little more than $12,000. And I would propose to you that we continue our asphalt resurfacing program, commonly called chip seal. We have some priority streets that we've talked about here with that co-op grant. So I think we get the quantities right to match that amount. And we would be chip sealing in June or July and close that grant out. So those proposed expenditures from the gas tax would be a little bit in excess of $150,000 there by several $1,000s. That is roughly equivalent to an annual revenue that we see coming in. So we should wind up the year with in excess of that $200,000 number that I mentioned, and then expect to receive $150,000 in revenues during the upcoming fiscal year. For the remainder of Great Blocks project, we are pursuing a Transportation Alternative Program grant. That's through NMDOT. We are feeling pretty good about that application. A lot of work on that application. Myself and Jason Phillips have commenced that process. It's a lengthy process. There's a lengthy environmental assessment associated with that. We would be looking at disturbance in our historic railroad area, so we would expect a rigorous process with environmental assessment to go forward. It could be that we could construct the rest of that project in the summer of 2019. It's not unlikely that we would it would take us till the summer of 2020 to get everything in line for that project. If we're unsuccessful with the TAP application, there are a couple other funding potential sources that we have identified. similar as far as the requirements, as far as the environmental assessment, as far as the match. So we would, at the future, propose that out of gas tax will provide again additional match and try to leverage what we have with funding from TAP or some other program. Also in the future, we would try to emphasize several projects. Waterworks has told us they plan on replacing a line that's very problematic in a portion of Brilliant Street and Hart Avenue. That will bring some disturbance to streets that are already in poor condition. So we would look at coming back and resurfacing those streets in the future. I think that a couple of downtown avenues that we would emphasize going forward in our program to work on downtown avenues would be those parts of Cook Avenue and Park Avenue between 1st Street and 3rd Street. We have done one block of Cook between 1st and 2nd, so we have another block of Cook, and we have both blocks of Park Avenue that we would like to prioritize going forward in the future. We're probably, again, looking at 2019, possibly legislative capital outlay to fund those. You also remember in the past that we had used that for storm drainage improvements, and we have a large need going forward in storm drainage improvements as well. We have applied for MAP funds and co-op funds for various projects, specifically additional chip seal. That's been a very effective method of resurfacing certain candidate streets, and we'd like to continue that. And then lastly, when we're talking about streets, I would just mention to you that last year we did accept a large volume of asphalt millings from an interstate project. Those millings are really a valuable resource to us, and we would look at reconstituting those millings and paving certain streets. Again, there's a criteria to where we would use those millings, but the process of reconstituting those millings would probably involve sending the millings through a crusher, crushing them down to a certain size, running them through a cold process known as a pug mill would be the piece of equipment where we add asphalt to the millings, lay them on a street with a thick final surface, and do that with a lay-down machine to get a smooth surface as you would expect with a hot mix pavement. So I think that we would work on that, some measure of streets, some volume of milling, some area of streets every year, year after year after year. That's probably a 10-year program. So we probably have 10 or 15 miles of streets that are good candidates for that type of resurfacing, and I would ask you to dedicate part of our resources to that in the future. So that's something that we'll talk about again starting in 2019. We would like to propose a pilot project where we use those materials to resurface our streets. Hot mix asphalt, typically the cost of that would exceed $100 a ton. It's probably closer to $120 a ton. We would expect that using these asphalt millings, we could resurface streets to an equivalent status for maybe $15 or $20 a ton. But there are some new processes that we have not done in Raton before, so we're going into a bit of a learning phase with that, but I think it's going to be very effective about improving the quality of our streets. I'm going to hold up there, Mayor and Commission, and ask Michael Ann if she has any comments before we get to the public comment phase.
Well, I think the city manager pretty well summarized at least the first 3 or 4 pages that we have in your draft budget. Just looking at my recap here, I did see one correction that I need to make, and that's on the Fund 213 for the library grants. The revenues are $24,902, so our ending cash balance should be 0. So I'll make that correction. He did make mention that we are required to carry a 1/12 reserve in our general fund, and so I'd say the last 2 to 3 years at least, we've maintained at least 3/12. We're currently projecting an ending cash balance that would still be close to a 4/12 cash reserve. And so that assumption in the general fund, I have budgeted the items that he discussed as far as the hangar and the ambulance, and so those are currently in this general fund budget. So anything else for your consideration that we would be adding would be coming from city reserves, general fund reserves, but we do feel that we do have adequate cash that we've allowed to build up in that fund over the last few years. So there are some funds available there for any other items that you may bring to us for consideration for the final interim. And as I've noted in the past, the budget is a living document, and so as you see throughout the year, we do 12, 13 budget adjustments during the year. So we try to get it as accurate as possible, but as things come up, we do make those necessary adjustments during the year. So we do follow a two-budget process. The interim budget is due by June 1st, and then we would close out the fiscal year June 30, roll over our ending cash balance into the new fiscal year budget, and then we would submit a final budget by July 31st. So there is still opportunity even between June and the end of July for us to make any necessary changes for the final budget. So while we do have a pretty tight time schedule between now and June 1, there is still plenty of opportunity for us to make any necessary changes for the final budget as well. The city manager did mention that possibly next week, I don't know if we would try to combine the joint meeting with lodgers tax, but have an actual workshop where you've had time to really digest this document, and we could have further discussions that day as well. And then on May 22nd, we would bring a final interim budget back to you for consideration. So, or we could have an additional budget workshop, so whatever the commission desires.
Thank you. I kind of like the idea of just meeting Monday, get two things out of,
Sounds great.
two meetings out of the way.
Yeah.
So you'll see in the budget, we haven't really done much with the lodgers tax budget because we haven't really had much input there. So, it's I wouldn't rely too much on the figures that we have in there. There needs to be a little bit of work on that particular budget for sure. And then some of the grants, a lot of that information doesn't come in until later on. So a lot of times we wait for the execution of those documents, and we would either put it into the final budget or do a budget adjustment later in the year, especially if we get some additional co-op funding and grants like that.
Okay. Are there any other questions or anything for Michael Ann or Mr. Berry? Would entertain any comments from the public?
Mayor, Commissioners, City Manager, Michael Ann. I'm here to advocate for what we're calling the Vacant Property Marketing Initiative. To answer any questions that may have come up in the interim, but I want to say, first of all, that any concerns about us duplicating work with Raton Main Street, we would be collaborating with them. I've talked with Brenda already, and one of the problems they're having is that their volunteers are having to take time to load the information from the inventory into the database which has been recommended to them. One of the functions of the independent contractor could be to assist in that process and speed that up. I also want to say that we see this as a one-time expenditure that hopefully you'd be willing to authorize out of the reserves. It's an important investment in our economic development. There's no question that the number of vacant buildings we have in spite of our efforts with the Raton Beautification Coalition, are still going to be a negative factor in new businesses considering the vitality, economic vitality of our community, and our ability to identify the property owners, to have a vacant property ordinance, and to contact them, let them know what their responsibilities are under that ordinance, and hopefully encourage them to put their property on the market at a reasonable price. That's something that Grover Raton's in a good position to supervise, because we have a real estate, business and real estate page on our website, and it's going to be getting increasing visibility as we add the AdWords campaign to that for specific types of buildings to be available. And if you have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
All right, thank you, Paul. Any questions for Mr. Jenkins?
I do have one question. Is on the, for the marketing initiative, are you planning to have all the properties online or just those that the owners would authorize? There's just a question about which properties would be part of that.
Well, the properties that are online would, of course, be those that are available for sale or lease or rent. We'll be in discussions with the property owners as to how they would best, what would be in their best interest, have them determine financially, so that they would be encouraged to make some determination rather than just sit on the property. And we're hopeful that a vacant property ordinance, which allows for the registration of those properties and enforcement of the codes regarding nuisances, would serve as an incentive to the property owners, to especially property owners who are not within our city limits, to take some responsibility for the upkeep of their buildings, and for perhaps having to let loose of the idea that this was going to be their retirement nest egg, and that time may have come and gone. So the construction that's taking place on the Marciano building was made possible because the owners of that building were willing to sell it at a reasonable price, not try to get all the money in the world, and it's turned into a $9 million project. If we can get some others to understand that now is the time to see if they can get a decent price, an equitable price for their property, that this will encourage business development in our community.
I actually have a couple of questions as well. Now you're asking for some funds to
$15,000 to hire an independent contractor who would collaborate with Main Street, collaborate with Grover Raton in terms of our webpage, and collaborate with the owners, most importantly.
Yeah.
And the reason we set the wage that high at $14 an hour is because right now the only one that I see being able to carry out that function in terms of contacting the owners and doing it in a way that's respectful and professional is myself. And I, quite frankly, am running short on time. You know, I try to do everything I can, but I think this is going to require a year-long project at approximately 20 hours a week.
Would the funding for this project fall under lodger's tax?
Lodger's tax could not be used for economic development.
Yeah, I didn't think so. So the other question I have then is, I believe we would have to follow proper procurement proceedings is that not correct?
For $15,000, I don't know what the requirements are.
Well, that was something that we hadn't really talked about. I mean, if it's considered a professional service, so I guess we have to make that distinction.
Right.
If it's a service or falls under a professional service, generally professional services under 60, we can typically.
Okay.
not have to do an RFP. Now, if it's a service, there would have to be some sort of a bid process. So, I mean, we really would probably have to look at that just to be clear.
Hey, I think we haven't really got that deep into it yet, and it's a good question.
I mean, I think what they're asking for is more of a pass-through where the city's just giving them the money and then they're procuring the service. But,
We
So-
would, and even with that the case, it's, you know, I think it would be viewed as a procurement on the part of the city.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, whatever I think we need to do a little review on it. That's, you know, something that's a little different.
In the training we received a couple of weeks ago, I think it'd be a stretch to call it a professional service by their definition from the procurement office.
And I agree with that. So.
Yeah,
It'd be a real stretch.
right.
Now, I would offer this. I agree. This is a high priority for us, and I'm really thankful we have community partners that are you know, engaged in this as well. This is important for Raton. We all have to work together, and as Paul I think identified, you know, responsibility on the part of those property owners. That's you can see just glaring lack of responsibility from private property owners, both residential and commercial, in Raton, and you can't regulate your way out of that. So you need to use every tool at your disposal, and I think that's where these vacant building measures can be very helpful. We're not going to be able to hire enough code enforcement officers to simply regulate this back to the condition that you want to get to. There are a number of factors that go into this. One of those is just simply improvement of the economic environment in Raton. So it's important that we put our efforts into our economic development measures. I think there are some good measures out there. A lot of times those requires diligence and patience to come to fruition. This is where I appreciate the efforts to grow Raton. They're an important partner with us on many of these economic development initiatives, and that can be frustrating because a lot of those, quite honestly, just don't pan out, and sometimes they take a long time to develop. And so they're a great partner for us on that. That's part of the equation. As economic development goes, it really raises all boats. It raises our property values. It increases demand for that property. Those are elements that we have had a problem with and struggled with in past years. So there are many factors to this, but certainly we've said the vacant building ordinance is an important component for us. Now, I would like to follow up with Paul, because for the vacant building ordinance to be effective, we have to build a comprehensive database, and we talked about this last time, of every structure really, and then determine, is that structure vacant or is it not vacant? And that sounds pretty straightforward when we talk about that here, but there's some challenges to that definition of a vacant building. So there's a large effort that we're looking at there. I think we want to work together to build this database. Certainly part of this is going to be assigned to city staff, but I would expect we would use a third-party service for that as well. But we're not at the point where we're going forward with that aggressively yet. We need a framework of the vacant building ordinance. So I think that comes first. As we've talked about, there is a careful legal review of that ordinance, and we have heard of portions of other cities' ordinance being struck down in court. So we are mindful of that. We have a ways to go on the effort. So I'm not saying that to guide you in the regard to the request. You have the request for your consideration, but just try to promote the conversation here.
Well, certainly
I would point out if I may, that I've become aware that the fire department maintains a vacant property database. However, they have the same problem with some of the information that Main Street does, and they don't necessarily have the owners. And matching those two databases would be helpful.
Well, and we have more than that. We have a utility database, and if the utilities are on or the utilities are off, that's a pretty good indication of the status of the building. So we have, again, not really comprehensive. There are a lot of situations we can imagine as to ownership of a particular building, but we do have some pieces of this, and so as far as our staff, it's really pulling the existing information together, and then of course there's assessor's office that has extensive information as well, and we want to sit down with them and see, well, what's the best way to access their data? How can we do that?
Sure.
So it's a little bit of a chore.
I had a question.
I was just saying it's definitely a lot more clear to me with this presentation. Thank you. I appreciate that clarity.
The development of the vacant property ordinance, of course, is the purview of the city manager working in conjunction with the commission. However, I think we can assist in that process by researching existing ordinances and other territories and not put that burden upon either the commission or the city staff, and present a comprehensive summary to the city manager for reference to the commission.
It was suggested at a training that Mayor Sagata and I went to, that wasn't it Espanola was having some
Espanola has a program they call Lean and Clean
Right.
that their city attorney has put together. His name is Frank Koppler. They were was it procurement agent that was very high on that, or it was a different training?
No, it was the city planner of
That's
Albuquerque.
right. City planner of Albuquerque, yes. And I've passed that information on to Mr. Berry. Also, they made available the city of Albuquerque's vacant building ordinance, their plan, and I passed that on to Mr. Berry as well.
This does sound like a very valuable service, something that would be very helpful, I believe. Obviously, we can't vote on it tonight, but
I understand.
Mr. Jenkins, have you run this by the 5 realtors?
When we first put the business and real estate listings on our website, we sent out a notification to all the realtors. What we have found is that the few realtors that are active at this time are very active and very busy, and they don't want to duplicate the work that they do in getting it on MLS or anything else. I have had cooperation from several of them, but it's kind of like we have to chase after them when they get new listings. It's not something they feel they have time to keep us up to date.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it.
thank you.
Any other comments for Mr. Berry? Or for the public? I got one question, I guess, on the, and since the chief is here, we can ask him too. On the ambulance, is there grants available to help us with that too as well, or?
Chief, you want to come forward?
There is some grants out there. Some of the grants that were through the state, they usually funded 5 ambulances for the state. They actually reduced that to 1 per region, so they only really funded 3 ambulances. So the money is pretty short out there for newer equipment.
Okay.
And Mayor, I would say that really all other types of equipment in fire and ambulance emergency services, we can fund. And typically the ambulance is something year after year over the long term that has not been funded through those traditional avenues, and we've struggled with.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just curious.
Yeah, I did apply for a grant and it was unsuccessful. So.
I know how you feel there. I have no other questions. Anybody else?
Oh, yeah, I'll do one question. You talked about the hangar. What we'll actually be doing is borrowing the money from ourselves and using it towards that with the payback from the revenues that we would get from,
Well, I just say that, Commissioner, because I think we would expect to see a revenue from those facilities in the future. And I would expect that would return to the general fund. So while it may not be a formal loan type of arrangement that we traditionally would look at, I think essentially that would be the expectation, is that the funds are replaced. And I don't know if that happens in the upcoming fiscal year. It may be longer than a year, but we would expect that the flight operations are gonna scroll up, and then we will see a revenue source from those operations.
Okay.
Any other comments?
Yeah, Mayor, I will make some final comments here. Of course, the utility boards are also working on their budget. You see, I think y'all have a budget that's been sent to you from Waterworks. RPS additionally would be working on their budget this time. And final thing, Mayor, I would just acknowledge the efforts of our clerk treasurer, Michael Ann Antonucci, in bringing this draft budget to you. That is just a lot of work by Michael Ann, and so she's worked long hours, she's worked weekends, she's worked nights. She's got a lot of effort into this, and there's just in this task, there's not a lot of help for her. So I really want to acknowledge her efforts.
Absolutely.
There.
Appreciate it.
Say thanks.
And in regards to the RPS budget, we've moved our meeting to the 21st to accommodate approval of that, hopefully that night, and then approval the following night with ours.
Mayor and Commission, did you say that you'd like to set up a workshop for Monday the 14th, and how does 5 p.m. sound to you on that?
You're bringing pizza, right?
A couple slices.
Order that in there.
Just kidding. Just kidding. All right. Any other comments about the budget, regarding the budget?
We'll bring a PowerPoint presentation that looks like a pizza. How about that?
All right. It'll help my diet. Okay, we'll move on to item J, City Manager's Report.
Thank you, Mayor and Commission. Earlier tonight, we had heard a number of proclamations and information that kind of highlighted the dedication of various city crews and departments. And, I'd just like to reiterate that some of these services we tend to take for granted, but I'll just point out a couple of them. As far as our water treatment plant crew that was here, I think that's definitely something that we take for granted, but we have a small crew, 3 people that work at the water treatment plant, really highly skilled people. We did have a change of personnel up there. We had a longtime employee retire and a new person move in, and it really has been a seamless transition to what is a highly skilled trade. Those guys are really, if they're not at the filter plant, they're thinking about what's going on at the filter plant, and really dedicated to that. And that allows us to take our water supply for granted, but it only happens with the efforts of that crew and their dedication and just continuous training that goes into being a certified filter plant operator. We've got a challenging time coming up there with the construction and upgrade of the filter plant. They've been doing quite a bit of work on existing replacing filter media, which you have to do about every 5 years. I would say that about everybody that you saw here tonight. Our dispatch, Carol Baca is greatly going to be missed, because that is a tough occupation, and they are there all the time. If you call, there's somebody to take your call. That's not easy to do with a small budget and a small town, and Carol has done an excellent job at running that dispatch center. we're going to miss Carol, but we do have to continue on operations. So we have posted a replacement for that position of a dispatch supervisor. We'll have a change there, but just like at the filter plant, we hope that we don't notice any sort of a change around the community. That's our hope, is that we continue to take that service for granted. We saw our police and fire departments here. Again, those are services that are offered every minute of the day, continuously. There's not a day off. We offer those services. That's not easy to do, again, in a small town budget. And I think it's an opportunity to just recognize that we have a lot of dedicated staff. We talked about Michael Ann's effort on the budget, on fixed assets, on the audit in past meetings. But Michael Ann has really right now a staff in our office that's as good as I remember in my 30+ years around the city of Raton. And so I think we see that dedication there. We see it in the utilities. We see it in public works, and I want to recognize all of them. And I say that because this is an important part of our strategic plan. And what we had heard leading up to that is the communications piece is important in our strategic plan. So I don't mind telling you about the dedication of the staff that we have in the city of Raton. We have commenced a newsletter that will be on our website. I know there were some technical issues in making that available, but we really look at providing information to the public from all of our departments about the things that they are working on. So if somebody is interested, you can see all of the activity that's going on throughout the city of Raton. We're dedicated to going to the radio station and talking about it. I think we learned prior to the election that a lot of people get their information that way, and that was valuable to people in making an important decision for the community as information that was presented there. So we want to keep that momentum up, and we want to reinstitute a program we had 2 years ago where departments would come to the commission meeting and update you and update the public on what was important in their department. And as you all learned from that effort, each department is pretty complicated, has a lot of moving parts, a lot of initiatives, a lot of things going on. And while we may take that for granted day in, day out, we do want to get that information out to the public. So that's something that we'll be working on. When I give you a report here in the city manager report, I really give you minimal information on that, and that's what I'm about to do here. But I did want to acknowledge the efforts of our staff. I wish we could give them all a 10% raise, but you see ones and twos in your budget. That's what we are bringing to you. Our Public Works Department have been emphasizing street patching. Our streets are not in bad condition, but we always have something to work on. I think, Mayor, before the meeting, we talked about a couple of areas that we need to follow up on. We emphasize at this time of year inspection of our drainage channels and our bridges. This is when we have dry conditions before we get into those wet conditions. We identify things that need to be done on drainage channels and bridges, and the next couple of months will be the time of year that we go out and accomplish that work. So we really emphasize that in the spring of the year. Of course, we've had extensive work in the preparation of our parks, getting our irrigation systems up and running, making sure our equipment is ready to go for the year. That's a large effort. We basically have 2 full-time employees and kind of a floating person that does everything you see on our parks, and we have extensive acreage of parks. So that is a big effort for those guys. They give you more than 100% during the time of the season, and they keep busy in the cold months also, but they have got their hands full. I really not sure how they accomplished that. In addition, we've done extensive work on the baseball and softball fields. We've done work on the dugouts. We've got that ready for the youth sports through the year. That's an important thing in Raton. So I want to acknowledge our guys for doing that. In addition to the dispatch supervisor and the police department, I would like to tell you that we do have a graduation of Officer Rodarte from the State Academy. He's going to graduate on May 16th and come back to us as a certified officer. So congratulations to Officer Rodarte. In the fire department, we have posted the position of a deputy fire chief. So that's an important position. A lot to do in our fire emergency services. We not only respond to wildland fires, structure fires, really any kind of emergency that happens in the region. So we will be considering filling that position of deputy fire chief going forward. In our aquatic center, we have extended hours in the summer. We've been gearing up for that with seasonal staff, so we're ready for a busy summer at the aquatic and really throughout our recreation programs. And that's a brief report on activities of the city of Raton. I'll tell you that I am scheduled to attend the New Mexico Watershed and Dam Owners Coalition 2018 Conference and Business Meeting. That's going to be held May 10th and 11th. That's later this week. It's held in Las Cruces. I have been asked to make a presentation regarding the Lake Maloya watershed recovery, so I'll be down there making the presentation. And that is all I have, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Berry. Appreciate it. Commissioner Chatterley, any comments additional?
Yep.
Commissioner Chavez?
I do.
Okay.
Today, Scott was present to reiterate the goodness that is happening with our workforce. I was approached at coffee by a person that's been very critical of everything we do. And he said, this is the best the city has been since 1970.
Nice.
Very good.
So the city crews are working the way they should be.
Cool. Great. Commissioner Schuster, any comments?
Well, I feel bad that we let the woman who had the comment about the water get out without making sure that she had signed in and that we had her name and contact information. So I guess I want to say to the general public, if you do come to a commission meeting and you have that kind of discussion you want to talk about, make sure you come during the general comments time frame, and also make sure that you leave your contact information.
And Mayor and Commissioner, Mayor Pro Tem, I would just state to you that we know about the claim. We have the information. I can promise you and guarantee you we have not had an episode of any sort of contamination in our potable water system.
Right.
Our dedicated crew that we talked about works diligently to maintain our water quality as the highest quality. We issue information annually as required by the Environment Department. We have a very high level of oversight, of course, on potable water systems. To operate that, we have extensively trained staff, and we have excellent water quality.
Yes, we do.
We have had no episodes of contamination in our water system.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Berry. Thank you for clarifying that. My comment, I will be attending this weekend the Mexico Municipal League Budget Committee meeting. That's how I get to spend my weekend, so thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate
for doing that.
it. And that's about it. That's all I have. Any other business come before the meeting? Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.